In this video, I'm going to walk you through the assembly process for your flat pack Magniature case. We're going to start off with a quick look at the different contents. Inside the box, you'll find your case cover, which doesn't require any assembly and can be put aside until the end. There'll be two identical core flute sections, which are the top and bottom panels of the case. Next, you'll find your Magniature Case shelves, which have a PVC rim around the edge, a rubber coating on the magnetic side, and bare core flute on the non-magnetic side. The next piece is the back panel of your case, which has 4 countersunk holes around the outside and high bond 3M tape around the inside. In the second section of the contents, you'll find your side panels, which have rubber feet, 9 countersunk holes, and shelf brackets on the inside. The side panels are mirror images of each other. You'll find a user guide with info on magnetizing your miniatures and using your case. You'll find the assembly guide, which you should read all the way through before you assemble your case. Next up, there are the 3 braces, starting with the handle brace. All the braces have high bond tape on one side and countersunk holes on the other side. We have the hinge brace, which goes on the bottom of the case, and the latch brace. The last thing you'll find in the box are 10 screws, which we'll use to assemble the case. We're now ready to start assembling our case. You'll need a Phillips head screwdriver. One with a magnetic tip is useful. A utility knife is very handy, but not strictly necessary. And you'll need the screws provided with the case. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the backing from the tape on the back panel. You could do this by hand, but I'm going to use the utility knife. The hardest part about the tape is getting a start, but once you get it started, it should peel off nicely. In the assembly instructions, it says to remove the tape in sections, but I'm just going to do it all in one go here. Sometimes there isn't enough of a gap between the tape and the core flute to peel the tape away easily. If you find this to be the case, you can score along the tape with the utility knife, and after that, it should come away fine. Once the tape is removed, we're going to start with one of the side panels. The side panel should slot fairly easily into place. You want to make sure that the core flute on the side panel sits inside the aluminium edge of the back panel. You also want to check that the corner of the side panels is inside the bottom and top edges of the back panel. You might need to press down firmly on the side panel to get it firmly into position. Once the side panel is in position, we're going to start setting our screws into place. The holes for the screws should align fairly well. You might need to move the panel slightly to get them to line up. We'll see a bit later what to do if the screws are misaligned. Set the first screw into position and use the screwdriver to partially screw it in. You should feel a fair amount of resistance when doing this. By only partially driving in the screws, we can make adjustments later if needed. Repeat for the other end of the side panel, pushing the panels together to align the holes if needed. Once the first side panel is in place, we're going to assemble the top and the bottom panels. These will sit against the foam tape and will slot into the space at the top and bottom of the shelf brackets. Slot the panel into place and lightly press along the foam tape to hold it in place. And repeat for the other end. When both the top and bottom panels are in place, we're going to assemble the second side panel. When assembling the second side panel, make sure that the top and bottom panels slots into the space provided at both ends. Slot the panel into position as we did with the first side panel, and check that the core flute and corners are positioned correctly. Everything is okay, push the panel into place. When the panel is in place, partially set the screws as we did before. You'll see that with this corner, the screw holes don't line up perfectly. Magniature cases are handmade, and as such, there'll be some small gaps and misalignments like this one. Even after some adjustments, the holes still don't line up. When I designed the flat pack version of the case, I took misalignments like this into consideration, which is why I chose screws instead of bolts or rivets for the assembly. As long as you can get the screw started, it will sort itself out as you drive it in. It just might be a little harder to drive in. After a little work, all 4 screws are partially set and we're ready to assemble the braces. Before assembling the braces, I'm going to slot one of the shelves into place so I can check that it's not too tight. The shelf should be able to move in and out throughout the assembly process. I'm going to start with the hinge brace, which goes on the bottom case where the rubber feet are. Remove the backing from the foam tape and make sure that the hinges face towards the top of the case and the countersunk holes are facing you. Place the brace into position and partially set the screws just as we did with the side panel assembly. You might need to push on the panels and brace to line up the holes for the screws. Moving to the top of the case, we're going to start with the handle brace. I forgot to film removing the backing from the tape, but make sure you do. You'll see here that I didn't drive the first screw in enough, so I had to redo it. After the handle brace, we'll assemble the latch brace. Remove the backing from the tape and make sure that the latches face the front of the case before driving the screws in. Once the braces are in place, make sure you can move the shelves in and out before moving on to the next stage. Now everything is fitted together, we can drive the screws home. And even though the instructions recommend differently, I'm going to do this from the back to the front of the case in the same order that they were partially driven in. You can use your screwdriver to drive the screws home, and you should find a fair bit of resistance as you screw them in. If you have one, a power drill will make this process much easier. If you're using a power drill, make sure it's set to the drill setting and the torque is set fairly low to start with. Each drill is different, so you'll need to adjust yours to suit. Once the rear screws have been driven home, I'm going to put 2 of the shelves in to make sure the case isn't too tight. I'll use the other 2 shelves to lift them so that they sit above the rim of the case. The shelves should be able to slide in and out freely. You'll see here that I'm pulling on the side panel as I drive in the second screw of the hinge brace to make sure that the shelves are able to move in and out. With the last screw, you can see that it's a bit misaligned. If this happens, you should be able to push or pull on the brace and the panel to get it to go in properly. The next step is to set the high bond tape on all of the braces and edges. The tape used on Magniature cases actually contributes a lot more to the strength than the screws or the rivets do. And once you set the tape, you should find it really difficult to remove it again. Press down firmly on all sections where there's tape before moving on to the final stage. The last thing we have to do is to put the shelves in and to fit the door. Line the shelves up with the front and the rear brackets and push them in. The shelves should be pretty tight fitting, but they should all slide in and out fairly easily. With the cover, set the lift-off hinges in place and start to close the door. Just check that the hinges are seated correctly to avoid any damage to the hinges or to the door. Clip the door in place and your Magniature case is now fully assembled.